Howdy folks, Jamboree here. It's time for me to tackle the disastrous George of the Jungle sequel. Ugh, wish me luck everyone. George now has his very own family, made up of wife Ursula and son George Jr. But the family suddenly have to face a boatload of problems now that Lyle, the villain from the first film, is back in the picture, who is working personally with Ursula's mother, Beatrice, to bring Ursula and Jr. back to civilization. The original George of the Jungle was a special movie that left wonderful memories for those who grew up with it. So of course this cash grab sequel sets out to bank on that nostalgia to bring fans back. How, you may ask? By lazily recreating exact scenes and gags from the first film as it possibly can. You could honestly play a drinking game or a round of bingo from the amount of callbacks that this film desperately tries to make. To rub salt in the wound, these cheap recreations are way less funny or endearing than the very scenes that they're shamelessly trying to rip off.
Pick up the phone!
Well, I think that was an overreaction.
Turn the phone around, you idiot.
This George.
Now, I honestly thought that this film was going to follow the next chapter of George's life. A humble movie about George raising a family in the jungle. I mean, that's what the movie's posters seem to suggest, right? However, this is a sequel that clearly can't settle for charming simplicity, because it bloats itself with a myriad of wacky hijinks and conflicts under the naive assumption that more high stakes somehow means more chance of kids paying attention. Do not go into this movie under the assumption that it's a father-son bonding film, or even a slice of life movie about a jungle family's daily struggles, because the film's many obstacles sweep those aspects way far to the side. Sure, the opening animated intro mainly suggests that the film will be about George wrestling between looking after his jungle buddies and being there for his loving family, but that's actually just one slice in a very overstuffed pie. We also have Beatrice trying to get Ursula back together with the wealthy Lyle, George's brother Abe being in debt to Lyle's casino, a mean lion taking over George's throne, and Lyle planning to demolish Ape Mountain to turn it into a resort. Oh, and none of these plots are executed decently, by the way. Like, it's already pretty hard to buy that George is taking his cruel mother-in-law's judgmental words to heart all over again.
George doesn't know how to make you happy.
While Beatrice's scheme to romantically unite Ursula with the first film's villain is such a stupidly impossible idea that she has to lazily resort to Vegas hypnosis to force a fake marriage, with said psychological stunt lacking in tension because Ursula has conveniently become a gullible, easy-to-trick ditz.
There's something about that ape that feels really familiar.
It's King Kong.
I thought King Kong was in black and white.
Would you believe Hollywood? They colorized it.
As for the jungle scenes, well, in the first film, I do remember George being more of a king in name only, with the animals treating him more like a local superhero than any kind of royalty. Yet this sequel insists that he's a real, actual king, just so it can contrive a bigger level of responsibility for George.
We make treaty and get everyone go zug-zug in separate areas.
Well, that's a good idea.
Don't get me wrong, I like the idea of George being forced to choose between the jungle and his family. That's a decent conflict. But a half-baked Lion King-style political strife wasn't necessary. Not every story needs a villain with a grand-scale takeover plan. George's struggles of balancing work and home was enough of a dramatic hook.
Sure Ursula liked being here with George?
How can you say that?
Then Ursula think things be okay, right? Because George rather not be king than lose Ursula.
It doesn't help that the mean lion is just a bargain bin Scar parody, who says the same 2 or 3 lines whenever we see him, like he's some kind of pull-string toy.
No king has ever missed ooh feather picking, at least not when lions rule. When lions rule the jungle, we never neglected our subjects. In every other story, the king of the jungle is a lion.
Not to mention, this plot all builds up to the heavily overdone animals versus the construction workers showdown that every single Save the Wild movie tends to end with, except this finale has more poop and fart jokes. Meanwhile, the Vegas scenes are dang underwhelming, all because Disney clearly didn't want to spend much on a straight-to-video sequel, so the fancy hotel spaces end up being pretty cramped for what are supposed to be luxury stays, while the casino shows have the glamour, glitz and spectacle of a tacky high school prom, which doesn't exactly make sense when said theatre is supposed to be owned by the super rich millionaire Lyle.
I'm the young generation, and I've got something to say.
Just watch Abe's Vegas show in the first movie. Doesn't it look 10 times better? However, the sets aren't the only victim of Disney's penny pinching and tight deadline. We also have low-grade visual effects that can only be described as eyesores. Yet the 2000s were very limited when it came to CGI effects and keying, but even the 1997 film's effects are better than their sequels. I mean, who on earth would look at these shots and think, oh yeah, that's good enough for a stamp of approval? Or, oh, I totally believe that these animals are sharing the same screen. Sometimes these effects are more than just distractingly terrible, they can also actually be full-on unintentional nightmare fuel. Thankfully though, the puppetry for the apes is just as good as the first films. It's the same articulate animatronics at work, plus the bodysuit actors are doing a decent job at finding a balance of believable realism and expressive personality. Heck, the puppets actually get to shine way more this time, because Ape has his very own plotline, and a few of the other gorillas get bigger parts. So I guess that's pretty cool. Before I wrap things up, I'm sure that you're probably all wondering about my thoughts on the controversial recasting.
Who the heck are you?
Me new George. Studio too cheap to pay Brendan Fraser.
You see, only a few actors reprised their roles for this sequel, while Christopher Schauman stars as George, Julie Benz took over as Ursula, and Christina Pickles now plays Beatrice. I think this recasting is fine. These new actors understand the characters okay and clearly watched the first movie before filming.
Sorry, George, late. But George had important royal duty to tend to.
In other words, you were playing coconut ball.
However, none of them are on par with the movie stars that they've replaced. I know it sounds kind of harsh, but a lot of these actors remind me of party impersonators. I feel a little awful saying that about lesser known actors, but that's sincerely the best way to put it.
George, no, he promised Ursula he see her tonight. Okay if George go to help animals?
It's really hard to recapture the magic in the bottle that was Brendan Fraser and Leslie Mann. Not only did they bring themselves to these characters, but they also shared a genuine on-screen romantic chemistry thanks to a real on-set mutual crush.
Ursula loved George?
So much.
George loved Ursula too.
To conclude, George of the Jungle 2 isn't just a step down from the first film, it's an embarrassing plummet into the deep, dank sewers. It'll certainly keep kids quiet while mummy and daddy cook dinner, but a great kids movie is more than just a key-jingling distraction or a free babysitter for parents. Heck, the original film proved that children's movies can be silly fun without being condescending. This sequel could have been easily compacted into a cute story about George bonding with his family in the jungle, while facing the relatable conflict of juggling multiple sides of his life. You know, something closer to the actual DVD cover and the animated intro at the start. Instead, Disney just made a boring Vegas vacation comedy / generic talking animal movie that fails to either move the franchise forward creatively or recapture the charm of the original. I've been Jamboree, hope you enjoyed the review. Cheerio, folks.
This Halloween season, lock your doors.
Too smart for you, huh?
Bolt your windows.
This is just the kind of Halloween prank that gets people hurt.
And hang on tight. Because Ernest is back.
Me?
And he's scared. Stupid. Ernest, scared stupid.